Hi, Mark, and today I want to talk about the Bank of England and some real anger about them. It's not entirely clear whether the Bank of England's chief economist knew how much he would be caught in the crossfire, but one thing is certain: Pill unleashed a veritable storm of indignation in Great Britain. The Daily Mail summed up the furor on its front page. Ferry, when the 190,000 a year chief banker tells the rest of us, you have to accept that you are poorer. Apart from the fact that the country's best-selling tabloid started a debate of envy, the headline certainly hits the point made by the chief economist. Pill spoke on a podcast from New York's Columbia University about the consequences of high inflation, which continues to plague the UK more than comparable economies. Unlike in Germany or France, the inflation rate in the UK is still in the double digits, at 10.1% according to the latest figures. And so Pill was saying that people and businesses in the UK had to accept that they were, quite simply, worse off. One must stop trying to maintain real purchasing power by raising wages and prices. Nobody from the Bank of England has ever publicly expressed what the central bank fears as clearly as Pill. If companies and trade unions do not moderate themselves, inflation could remain at a high level for longer. In any case, Pill warned the companies against passing on the energy costs to their customers by charging higher prices. And he indirectly called on the workforce not to exaggerate with their wage demands. Pill's major concern is that as wages rise, prices will continue to rise and the economy will enter a wage price spiral that will be difficult to break out of, just like in the 1970s. To avoid such a scenario, the Bank of England is likely to raise interest rates further at its next meeting next week. At 4.25%, it is already higher than that of the European Central Bank, who has 3.5%. The prospects for the Conservative British government are not good in this situation. At the beginning of the year, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak promised to halve inflation. But 4 months later, not much has happened. No wonder the Tories are far behind the Labour Party in the polls, with local elections taking place across much of England this week, and it will become clear just how much blame the Conservatives will get for the current economic situation. But I don't have any numbers yet. Only the surveys that say the high cost of living is a topic that worries the people the most. If you want to understand how much the cost of living crisis dominates everyday life, you only have to go to a supermarket. In order to know which foods are particularly expensive, it's worth taking a look at a list from the consumer protection organization which shows how much the prices have risen within a year. Butter and milk plus 25%, baked goods up 20%, vegetables and meat up 13%. And along with electricity and gas, food costs are the biggest price drivers in Great Britain. At least the situation on the vegetable shelves has eased again. Tomatoes, heads of lettuce and peppers were in short supply in British supermarkets during the winter. And this was partly due to the bad weather and partly to the consequences of Brexit. The British exit from the EU has not only caused food prices to rise. Costs for companies trading across the English Channel have risen significantly because of customs bureaucracy. In addition, the pound sterling is no longer as strong compared to the euro and especially to the US dollar as it was before the Brexit referendum. And the result is that imports have become more expensive. No wonder the mood in the country is changing, and according to surveys, the majority is now critical of Brexit. And this hasn't escaped Sunak's notice, and so the Prime Minister is trying to improve relations with the EU again. Now that the dispute over Northern Ireland has been resolved, kind of, there's another signal from London that has been very positively received in Brussels. You know, and I talked about this, that the British government intends to abandon its plan to review or scrap all EU legislation that is still in force by the end of the year. The corresponding law, the retained EU law bill, is to continue to come into force, but de facto, the government wants to approach the matter pragmatically. Business Minister Kemi Badenoch said, much to the annoyance of hardcore Brexiteers, that most of the nearly 4,000 EU pieces of legislation that remain in place remain untouched. By the end of the year, 800 might be abolished. That's what she said. And in any case, the government wants to remove a sunset clause that has been envisaged so far, according to which EU legislation would automatically expire at the end of the year if it is not revised or maintained by then. The December 31st deadline alarmed the British economy. Business associations and trade unions were already fearing a new phase of uncertainty, and now this danger seems to have been averted. The EU regulations that are still in force are not just about product standards, but also about consumer protection rules and employee rights. And even if Sunak still praises Brexit in public appearances, he has long since changed course towards the EU. Unlike the two ex-Prime Ministers Liz Truss and Boris Johnson, he is cooperative with Brussels. The time of constant confrontation is over. And Sunak's calculus is pretty clear. If he wants to have a chance in the lower house general elections next year, he has to give the credible impression that only he can get the economy, which has been hit by Brexit, running again. And that won't be easy. There have been strikes in all kinds of sectors in Great Britain for months, and nurses again went into action on Monday, but it's resolved now as far as I know. The employees of the National Health Service NHS demanded a wage increase in the amount of the inflation rate, that means double-digit. The government rejected this, hoping that inflation will fall significantly by the summer and with its wage demands. And as far as I know, they offered 5% plus £1,250 now. But in any case, the Bank of England also assumes that the inflation rate will fall in the coming months. The only question is how fast and how strong. High inflation aside, there is another concern in the in the UK, and that's weak growth. The forecast by the OECD at least gives little hope. Accordingly, there should only be 2 countries among the G20 countries whose economic output is shrinking this year, and that is Great Britain and Russia. Britain and the EU have finally stopped fussing over Brexit, and another example there is that electric car makers want them to use the love game to skirt an oncoming tariff cliff. After the resolution of the post-Brexit deadlock on Northern Ireland's trade rules, hopes have been raised in the industry that both sides can start devising a plan to prevent automakers from being hit by new tariffs in early 2024, which is part of the TCA. 4 people familiar with talks told the magazine Politico that the UK and the EU are now for the time being officially discussing the issue, which centers on so-called rules of origin under the UK-EU Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the TCA. Automakers say they need a lot more clarity about what help to expect, and that fast. Under a temporary exemption in the TCA, up to 70% of an electric battery's component can come from outside the UK or EU before tariffs take effect. But that threshold will drop to 40% on January 1st in 2024, meaning vehicles crossing that limit will face a 10% tax in EU-UK trade. It's part of a bid by both sides to boost the domestic electric vehicle industry and reduce reliance on Chinese imports. But automakers say they are not ready and pushing for more time. The EU member states are also increasing the pressure on Brussels. The phasing in of electric vehicle regulation helps trade to continue, but perhaps not for long enough. That was said by Fabienne Loost, Director General of Belgium's Foreign Trade Agency. Belgium is the EU's second largest car exporter to the UK after Germany. The deadline for increasing battery components sourced from either the UK or the EU is burned into the Brexit trade deal, so it would require a decision by both UK and EU members of the Joint Partnership Council, which governs the deal, to make a change. The Council has only met twice since its inception in 2020. Such discussions at the highest level seem to be a long way off, and there are no talks going on, said a spokesman for the European Commission. On a technical level, however, officials are speaking, and the industry is hoping that the improved mood can bring about a breakthrough. The issue of electric vehicles has been raised at a technical official level, and there have been discussions. That was said by a senior UK MP at least. and this was also confirmed by a British official. Since March, the teams of UK Foreign Secretary James Cleverly and European Commission Vice President Maroš Šefčovič have been holding preliminary discussions at a technical level, mainly on the definitions of some of these treaty elements in the TCA, such as the upcoming deadline, as an auto industry figure said. The UK Department for Economy and Trade is also on site, and everyone is starting to have internal discussions about what to do, they say. The person asked for anonymity in order to be able to speak openly about sensitive issues, so no media have reported who it was. While there are no official discussions about the TCA and its mechanisms for resolving trade disputes, according to the Industry Insider, there appears to be a greater understanding by governments on both sides of the danger of cross-border trade in electric vehicles. Before the two sides signed the Windsor Framework to resolve the Northern Ireland issue, it was a resounding no from the EU, and EU officials have been told not to actively involve their counterparts. But ties are starting to thaw, they say, filling the sector with hope that they can start to find a way for both sides to come together. But that's a lot of, and this source says this and this source says that. We have to wait and see what happens there in the end. But I mentioned that a lot of times before, there are still transitional periods in the TCA that haven't ended yet. So there's a lot of consequences and impact none of the sides is feeling yet, because those transitional periods have not run out yet. And Brexit was part of this video, so I already can remind everyone again. If you still haven't visited my Outside Views Games channel, on May 15th there will be a mid-month game, so to speak, and that one will be a Brexit game. So keep that in mind. I'll put an announcement on this channel when it's out. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.